Second part of a two-part series at the National FOP Wellness Summit, and you're going to hear some more wonderful testimonies of the work that's done for police officers and their families. Well, here we are. We're back again. We took just a few minutes break so that we could get our precious new guests ready and tell them all the things that we don't do because we just kind of do what we do, right?
Yeah, just get on here and talk.
Just get on here and talk and visit and hang out. You know, people are the most interesting thing on the planet because everybody has their own story. Everybody's life really is like a movie or a book. No two people are the same. Everybody's eyes are different, their fingerprints are different, their voice pattern's different. And when you stand before God, that's how he takes attendance. He knows when you're talking, when you're not. Your face is before him. And so when we get an opportunity to have guests on the program, it's fun because we have to look at each other every week. Lots of weeks. There's 52 weeks out of the year. Come on, ladies, it's bad.
Yeah.
So you're helping us today because, first of all, you're bringing some beauty on the program. Because look at Rick. I mean, really, come on, it's bad. And then look at me. It's really bad. So thank you so much for being with us today. And what both of you represent is very precious to me personally because it impacts my life very personally with my family and my wife that I've been married to for 36 years, who is a survivor, and living with her, and of course my son helps with the program and all that we've been through together in life from her childhood. So it's a great blessing to meet both of you personally and to be with you. And great job you did today in your part of the program here at the Wellness Summit. So if you would, I'll let you kind of talk them through their introduction. And
you know, earlier in the episode, we had the National FOP president. We had the National Director for Wellness. And then one of the things that we also wanted to capture and talk about, especially having both of you here, is the other side of what we do to pay tribute and to honor, not just our fallen officers, the officers that we lose throughout the year, but also to honor and pay tribute to their families who also make that sacrifice. And we have Diane, who is here. She's the executive director of Concerns of Police Survivors. It's referred to as COPS. It's a national organization that really focuses on supporting those families, but also all survivors. So Diane, maybe you could introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about your background, because I don't know that many people realize how intricately involved you are in the profession and how you get it from all these different angles, but also what COPS is all about.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. Boy, I tell you what, the profession of law enforcement, I think, like your wife, was very young. My dad was an Illinois State Trooper, so I grew up, I feel like, in the profession in a very, very small town in Illinois where, you know, the bad guys came to our house to find my dad because, you know, he was the only law enforcement. So they would sometimes knock on the door and different things would happen out in our front yard. It was It was definitely a front row view of what law enforcement did. But as many little girls are, my dad was absolutely my hero. And when I grew up and decided what I was going to do, I took the path. I broke his heart, and I became a municipal police officer instead of a trooper in the city of Columbia, Missouri. And I spent 23 years there. And during that time, I lost a dear friend in the line of duty who introduced, you know, her family introduced me to COPS and to this position. And her name is Molly Bowden, and on January 10th of 2005, she was 26 years old, and she stopped a car in a good part of town, actually, and just completely unprovoked, the driver, a young man, got out of the car and immediately started firing on her before she had an opportunity to even get her weapon out of her holster.
Jesus.
So she went down, and they shot her again, and it was she laid on the side of the road until a citizen came and pulled her radio out and called for help for her. And luckily, one of the officers that responded and arrived there first had a lot of medical background, and so he provided care to her until the ambulance got there, and she had every opportunity over the next 30 days to try to survive that attack, which proved to be devastating. As a department, we were really, we were very innocent to that. We had never experienced that in Columbia, Missouri. We're a college town. You know, we had a lot of bad guys that shot at each other, but...
What was the size of your agency at the time?
Yeah, we were about 160 sworn.
Okay.
So not large. Well, we were small enough that we knew pretty much everybody there. So we came together as a department with a great chief that provided great leadership to us. And we grieved over the next 30 days and watched. In the shift meeting room, we had a big whiteboard. I don't know if they still have those these days, but they had a big whiteboard with dry erase markers that they would provide updates, and we would watch, and our day would either be higher or lower based on how Molly was doing that day. So it was a long 30 days, but ultimately on February 10th, the injuries became too much, and she died, and a lot of our innocence as an organization kind of died with that too, as we realized it could happen to us in Columbia, Missouri.
Now, what year did you retire from law enforcement?
2014.
Okay.
2014.
And then did you retire and go right into cops, or how did that work?
I did. So I learned about cops from Molly's dad, who about 9 months after she died, he went to the parents' retreat, which cops host retreats for all the different survivor groups.
Which I don't think many people, well, a lot of folks outside of law enforcement especially, they don't even know that this occurs.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So COPS provides peer support. They basically will put the different survivor groups that are alike together at a retreat, and it's all free of charge. We feel like a survivor has already paid too much with the loss that they've suffered. So we bring parents together, spouses together, kids together, young as 6 years old.
Oh my!
And teenagers, siblings, fiancés, significant others, and even extended family to retreats. And that's what Molly's parents went to. They went to the parents' retreat, and I had recruited Molly to come work at the police department, so I had a special layer of survivor guilt that was going on there. And I remember her dad coming in and grabbing me in the hallway because I couldn't get out of the way fast enough. I was going to be the one that ducked into the corner because I didn't want to make that eye contact. Yeah, absolutely not. And he caught me, and he told me about going to parents' retreat. And he smiled, and he said, he goes, I went to this retreat, I laughed out loud for the first time. He said, and I really think that it saved my life. I'm going to be okay, is what he told me. And I remember that from when I retired, and I was looking for that next position, and this position at COPS. And I knew that I wanted to make that impact on another survivor's family.
And it's such a tremendous thing that COPS does. You know, my wife's dad was lost in the line of duty, and her family, it was in the 70s. And in the 70s, there wasn't a whole lot of things like that took place. And
support or resources or any of that.
No, I mean, it was, we're sorry, and I mean, she remembers a lot of the details of the night and all that, but the aftercare that you do, that the organization of COPS does with the families, and the different retreats that take place, and the retreats for the children, the retreats for the parents or the husband or the wife, or those things are so impactful and so important to the care and the aftercare of those families. I just can't say thank you enough. I mean, it really is. And I know you have a great team that works. Oh yeah, I'm very partial to our team in Indianapolis, so forgive me if I'm biased, but they're just such absolutely tremendous folks that are full of compassion and full of care, and they work their behinds off to take care of every detail. It's amazing.
What a lot of people don't realize about COPS, and we were formed in 1984, so that would be after your wife lost her dad. But we have been around. This year, it'll be 40 years that we'll be celebrating. Wow. It's pretty cool. But one of the things that people don't realize about COPS is that we'll provide that support. It's a lifetime support. So should your wife want to attend an adult children's retreat, which we have something for her as well, she would be welcomed with open arms.
May push her off that cliff.
And you can come with her, sir.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize or think about that. I mean, just Think about that for just a moment.
That's
a
amazing.
lifelong commitment to these survivors. And it's just remarkable to watch because you not only see the healing that occurs, but the key is the restoration that occurs as well. Yep. And it's just a powerful thing to see, so often. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but maybe later you could talk to us a little bit about DC and the Police Week and the memorial and all those things. But you watch families start from the death, the critical incident that occurs, through the police memorial, and then all those years after. It's just a remarkable investment that's made into those families. As you've said, they've paid that sacrifice, and there's nothing we can do to pay it back to them.
Right.
But this is a great step in that direction in terms of just the staying with them for the rest of their lives. We always say you can't shake us after we get linked up, and we all mean that.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing. Now, Shelley, you have a component in cops and experience with cops, but you have also, you're working on a pretty recently new endeavor under the umbrella of cops. Can you just share with us that whole package there?
Absolutely. Back in February of 2020, the COPS National Board voted to help start a separate organization, hence the beginning of Survivors of Blue Suicide. And with the blessing of the COPS board and the organization, Lori Putnam and I left COPS to start Survivors of Blue Suicide. And we were supported by COPS and Law Enforcement United, and honestly, the Fraternal Order of Police also. And so we had very meager beginnings, but we grew and we're continuing to grow. And when the legislation was passed, the Public Safety Officer Support Act was passed, that changed the dynamics for both organizations. And so now we work together to make sure all suicide survivors, regardless of their end of watch, are taken care of.
That's awesome.
Wow. So, a lot of people probably still aren't even familiar with that in a lot of ways, that is out there. Now, one of the things that we always talk about on this podcast, this channel, but really try to drive those discussions in other forums through the National FOP and other ways, is really shining a light on the scourge of suicide on our profession. It's this issue that seems to linger in the shadows, and people don't want to talk about it. Although I think in recent years as a profession, we've just kind of forced the issue that, hey, we are going to talk about this. But for folks that are outside the profession, they know of the officers that die in the line of duty, but they're shocked when they learn that a lot of times we're averaging 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 times as many officers dying as a result of their own hand.
Yeah. Than any other thing.
That's right.
I mean, that's the crazy part is any other part of what they deal with, and the danger and the dark and the evilness, the critical issues in their own life from doing the job brings them to a place where they don't believe they're necessary in life anymore.
It's very tragic.
Very tragic.
And in real time, as we're recording this, just in the last 3 days, I think right now we're at 11 officers that have been shot in the line of duty. I think 3 of which have lost their lives. But since the beginning of the year, just not even in 2 full months yet, I think the latest statistic I saw was we've already had 17 law enforcement suicides. 17.
Yes.
That just boggles the mind of folks, again, because they don't know it, they don't realize it. Yeah. And then immediately when you talk to folks in the public about that, they say, well, why on earth is that happening, and why aren't we doing something about that? I think this is a great example of some of the things that we're doing, because it's not just about after the fact. Your focus is also on prevention as well, is it not?
Yes. We actually assist cops. They do a traumas of law enforcement training.
Yeah.
And SBS provides a survivor for day 3 where they talk about suicide, and they tell their story, and it has a huge impact on those officers that are sitting in that audience. So COPS is doing such a fantastic job of trying to create resilient officers and to provide them the information. And then they put a survivor in front of them, and it gives them the reality This can be your reality if you don't take care of yourself, and this is your family's reality.
Mm-hmm. You know, and a lot of times when present in different locations and whatnot, I try to always ask that question, especially amongst law enforcement professionals. So I always ask, you know, raise your hand if you've been affected by suicide in the profession. Every hand goes up in the room. Yes. And then I'll say, keep your hand up if more than one. And most every hand stays up. It's just a tragic, I don't know, outcome, I guess, for the profession, and the importance of the Wellness Summit and these topics of preventative maintenance, prevention through officer wellness. With this focus on the mind, body, and spirit, I think we're starting to try to turn the tide a little bit.
And it's not, and the officers that take their own life, one of the reasons they don't say something is because it's been looked at as a weakness, or they're weak, or we should have known there was some kind of a weakness. And well, they wouldn't have made it through all the years they've made it through if they were weak.
Absolutely.
Right.
No, they're broken. They've been broken by incidents, by violence, by the wickedness of the darkness of the day. Of sometimes they've been wounded.
Physically
wounded, mentally wounded. I mean, their heart's been wounded in the process. They're trying to keep their job or keep their position or keep their role, and it just sucks them into that place.
There's a myth out there that officers we hear when we talk to them when they're in a really dark place, and the ones that have later shared their story because they successfully did not die by suicide, but they tell that story and they talk about how they feel like their family may be better off if they're not there because they're so broken, and they may be having financial problems, or they may have dark moments in their life, and they feel like the family will be better off if they're not there. And I can tell you from our experience of talking to family members every day, and Shelley could attest to this as well, is the families are never better off. And so I can say if there's any officer that is thinking that might be the right answer for their family, it absolutely is never the right answer for the family. Even if the relationship is terrible at that time, it's never the right answer for that family.
Yeah. You increase that pain.
And the pain stops for that one person. But now you've created, 135, I think is the estimate, people who are suffering the pain from your loss.
Say that again. Explain that.
When that officer takes their life, their pain may stop. But there's about 135 people that are affected by that one officer's death.
Wow.
And so you now transfer that pain from that one person to 135 people.
And here again,
I'm writing this down because that's good right there.
Yeah, I mean, so many officers, they're so focused on taking care of other people that sometimes they need to hear that even if you're not wanting to take care of yourself, you need to understand the impact of this beyond you. And a lot of times that can at least get an officer to push pause and seek help, seek resources. The wellness component provides so much of that, really in real time anymore, where we have real-time numbers and resources and mental health professionals, peer officers, chaplaincy. I mean, the whole gamut is out there. But the one thing that I always see is it takes the courage usually of a fellow officer to also say, wait a minute, push pause, and we need to talk. We need to
create that pause. Create that pause for your fellow officer, for your friend. If there's a way that you can create that pause just to make them stop long enough for that to pass, and then you can get them help. It's just creating that pause.
So I got a good script. Can I throw it? Yeah. Since I am kind of the preacher part of this, can I throw a good scripture out here about this? Because Jesus in Matthew, he's dealing with his men and the naysayers of that day. And they're mouthing off about eating, you're not supposed to eat at this time and eat this right thing, about the body, right? Because we deal a lot with the mind and the body and exercise and all the things to get stress off of us. And Jesus makes a statement. He says, whatever goes in your mouth and into your belly, it also goes out. We're not going to talk about how, but it does. It's in the Bible. He said it's out of the drawer. Yeah. But he says, But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceeds all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of intents. And I find that that's what happens to people that we've dealt with that were suicidal, officers that were suicidal, is they will make this statement quite often. You said it a few minutes ago. I just kept saying to myself, everybody would be better off without me. Or I just kept saying to myself, if I could just get out of this, I kept saying to myself, I won't be in pain anymore. If I could just leave this world, I would be happy, I would be fine. Those are the intents of the heart speaking through the mouth. Even your mind has a voice, right? You say things to yourself in your mind.
Self-talk, yeah.
Self-talk. Mm-hmm. And Jesus himself said, out of the heart proceeds the issues of life, but also out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. One of the reasons we started this podcast was to help not only the mind, not only the body, but start dealing with the heart of officers and the heart of families to help them understand that some of the things you're saying to yourself, you're thinking about, is self-talk that comes from an issue of the heart. And if you'll yield the heart, you can change this voice, right? Mm-hmm. If you yield where it's one of the reasons during rehab or things they'll say you have to believe in a higher power, or you're not going to make it through this because you're just going to keep going back to the same addiction or habit. You got to work on the heart. What are you believing? And sometimes their faith elevates to such a point that they take their life because they truly believe what they've been saying to themselves and in their mind for all that time. So if we could change the heart, change what they're believing about themselves, about the 135, because officers care. Yeah. And they always care about everybody else, right? If we can get them to get that care, that's why I wrote that down, because that just touched my heart. If we can get them to care about not doing it more than they care about doing it, I think we can see a breakthrough in that. Just saying, it's just a podcast, but
it's a very valid
just a
point.
thought.
Now, Diane, you guys as cops, you also do a lot to work with folks in the moment of tragedy. Mm-hmm. So when we have a line of duty death that occurs, God forbid, I think what a lot of people may not know is that cops oftentimes have representatives that engage right away. Is that not right?
That is true.
In mm-hmm. different states around the country. Talk a little bit about from the time of the death, the critical incident that occurs, moving forward, what does cops do through that process?
Absolutely. Well, we have 55 chapters that are around the country. We're not in every state, but we're in most states that have a higher number of line of duty deaths. And so, depending on the chapter, they may be involved. For example, in Indiana, the cops chapter is embedded right into their funeral assistance team. So they will respond with the funeral assistance team to help the day of, the hour of, as soon as the call comes. They
walking right alongside the survivors.
Right alongside the FOP from Indiana and their team, and cops is right there. And what they do is they're the person, when you have the spouse that goes with this team out, and there's a brand new spouse there that has just had their absolute world taken away from them, and they're the most devastated. They may not understand what's going to happen over the next few days as they go through the funeral and what benefits are and what all that means, and it's very public. That spouse that's sitting right there has already done that once, at least once. So they will be able to have conversations with somebody that truly understands what it's like to sit in that seat.
And so I think this goes back to what you were just saying. So when you've got that spouse, the child, the peer officer that could start getting very negative self-talk going because they're so overwhelmed, you really have this life raft that's been tossed to you that is a fellow survivor that may not be able to say, I know exactly what you're going through, but they can at least say, I've walked this path, and start providing some of that more positive self-talk back into their situation.
Because faith the Bible's very clear, faith comes by hearing.
By hearing, yeah.
Now, in biblical perspective, he says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But faith comes by hearing, doesn't come by seeing, it comes by hearing. And so if you have a peer support or someone who's gone through the same situation, maybe someone who's gone through the suicidal self-talk and has had their life restored and their heart restored, and they're speaking to you a belief opposite, or faith in living instead of faith in dying. That's really what the officer's doing, is they're putting their faith in dying. Instead of putting their faith in dying, putting their faith in living, because somebody who's been through it is talking to you and getting into your head through your ears. It most often can turn those things around and put them back on the track for life.
Well, what it does is it creates hope.
There you go.
And it's really it's all about hope. That I'm watching this other spouse that got through this, and I'm watching them, and they seem to be doing okay. Their kids are okay at this point. They may be several years down the road, but it shows that little bit of hope that things can be okay in their family.
There you go.
So it's a little bit different. So in Indiana, it's right away. They'll respond right with. In each chapter and each agency or state, they may do it a little bit different, but by the time they've went through the funeral and it's time to invite them to National Police Week, the chapter will have met that family and will have offered to sit with that family and then help them get through what is National Police Week, which is a huge event in every survivor's world in that first year and a half after a loss.
So Police Week is normally always, except for recently we had some exceptions after COVID, but
right.
In May.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And around Law Enforcement Memorial Day, which is the 15th of May.
Yes.
But talk a little bit about Police Week. What is that, and what is it really designed to do, not just in the honoring, but beyond that? What's it designed to do?
So what Police Week does from the cops' perspective is it gives us an opportunity to take every survivor from across the country and assist them to go to the nation's capital where their officer will be honored nationally. And it also allows them to connect with survivors from across the country. And I think that's really the beauty, for me, the beauty that I see happen at Police Week is that's where I feel like a lot of healing starts happening when those survivors, because they realize in their own community they may be the only one going through that.
Yeah, they go about that.
Yeah, they go to Police Week and they see so many survivors that are going through the exact
From
same
all over
thing
the country.
all over the country. And they get opportunities to have conversations outside the elevators, in the restaurants, just in the hallways or at the events, and they'll go to the candlelight vigil, and they'll, as a group that is so much larger than any one, it makes them feel like they're not alone, and they're not alone. We'll surround them and then obviously be with them for as long as they need us. But that starts at National Police Week, where they feel that sense of, I'm part of this larger law enforcement community.
And when you do that, you also have sessions throughout the week for those survivors, correct?
We do.
And this is what I think is so cool, is you connect like survivors. So down to very intricate levels, but you have not just parents with parents, but you have moms, survivor moms with moms, survivor dads with dads. Talk a little bit about that, how you do that.
Yeah, so we'll break down obviously by the survivor type, so moms with moms, dads with dads, but then we'll also look at how the officer died, because sometimes the dynamics are different. We had a huge influx recently of officers that came, or families that came of officers who died from COVID. That's a very different loss that family went through than necessarily a felonious death that was very public.
Right.
And so we put the COVID families together so they were true peers to each other and that's how we approach it all. We'll put officers that died in a car crash with other families that experienced something similar, or if we're talking about 9/11 cancer deaths, that's also a whole different experience. They watched their officer die over a period of time.
That's
a different grief,
right?
different grief dynamic.
Different,
Yeah. So we'll try to put as like as we can. We offer about 36 sessions.
Think about
all
that.
gone on at the same time.
That's wild.
Same time through that week there.
Yeah. through that day.
I remember being at the National Cops Week and shocked at how many deaths from New York from 9/11, and then hundreds from COVID.
Yes.
I don't think people really understand how many law enforcement officers we lost in communities because of COVID. Hundreds. And just blows your mind.
It is so many. And I think back at 2019, prior to COVID, was our largest National Police Week ever. Yeah. We honored 232 officers. At one of our police weeks during COVID, we honored 563. Wow. So just the sheer jump in, and so many families affected.
And so when folks come out for Police Week, they have those sessions, educational sessions that are occurring, and support groups, really. Yeah. One-on-one support as well. Right. And then they also have the honors and the tributes. You mentioned the candlelight vigil. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those tributes that are done through the week?
Yeah, there's two large events. Of course, there's events going on all throughout Police Week, and I can tell you, if you're listening to this and if you've never been and you are a law enforcement officer, you should go, because you'll be so proud of the profession you chose. It's just a really neat tribute to law enforcement throughout the week.
And I always say to people, you should go once when you don't have a line of duty death with your agency.
Right.
Yeah.
Just go and take it all in, and then you absolutely need to go again when that happens, because it's two different
dynamics.
That's right.
So when the families go and they have the officers that escort them from the agencies, there's a candlelight vigil on May 13th that's put on, hosted by the National Law Enforcement Memorial Fund. And that's a large event on the National Mall. About 30,000 people will attend that, and every officer's name will be read out loud and candles will be lit, and it's just a
30,000 attend it.
Generally, that's about that amount.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's like a sea of people.
It really is.
Candles
Uniform.
and light.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
It's a beautiful, beautiful event. Mm-hmm. And then the next day is the sessions for cops that we offer for the survivors. And then there's events going on all over DC for law enforcement. And then on the 15th is the FOPs and the FOP Auxiliaries Memorial Service, which is just a absolute, it's somber, but it's a tribute, and it's so honorable. Typically, the president is invited to come and speak to the families and to officially express his or her, hopefully someday her, condolences on behalf of the country. And it's an amazing event that those survivors go right up on the Capitol lawn, and they get to go place a flower. It's the one event they get to participate in.
Yeah.
So
and I want to ask you about that, just a little perspective and insight. And Shelley, I believe you've been there, at least around the stage, if not on the stage during that ceremony, but you absolutely have been. Describe that for people, because where you're at, you're on the grounds of the Capitol building, the United States Capitol, and when you're up on that stage, you've got the survivors that are out there, and there's usually 30 to 40,000 people there. Yeah. And then your view is straight down the National Mall. What's that like?
You know, the only way I can describe it is it's overwhelming in the moment, as you realize the amount of sacrifice that you're looking at, and you remember during those times. You remember, like for me, I remember the people, the guys and gals that I worked with. You know, it was Molly, but the grace of God, it was one of us, and you just realize that you're there, and it's one large family, and it's an incredible event.
Yeah, and you know the thing, you know, you literally, the nation is pausing to, I always say this, the candlelight really is focused, to me it seems like, focused on honoring that officer. And then at the memorial, while we're honoring the officer, it really is a focus on honoring the family. Yeah. The family receives a medal of supreme sacrifice on behalf of their fallen officer, and it's, you got the President of the United States there stopping and not only honoring their officer and their family, but thanking them. And you take in that whole environment and you realize how big what our officers do day in and day out. I always say that they're not heroes, as we always say, how they died, but how they lived. But also every officer that puts on that uniform, puts on that badge day in and day out. Yes, even if they don't think they're making a difference, they're making a tremendous impact for the country, not just their local community.
How did it affect you, Shelley, the first time you went?
The first time I went was for Molly's funeral, Molly's honoring. I was with Diane. It had a huge impact. You know, I look at it a little different than some of my coworkers. I was shot in the line of duty in 1996. So when I went, I looked at it as, but for the grace of God, go with my family here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, bless your heart.
You know, you think about it, the Law Enforcement Memorial is the only living memorial still in the District of Columbia. And I tell people, you know, if you've never been to that wall to look at all those names, as a citizen, you have an obligation, I think, to do that. But now when you go, there are new panels that have been added on top of the wall.
To it, yeah.
That are there to start adding new names to, because we've literally run out of room for the names.
Sad.
And I think, Shelley, you're exactly right. Every officer stands at that wall, looks at the names, maybe of a fallen brother or sister that they know personally, or all these other thousands of names. And every officer that looks at that realizes their name could go on
Yeah, it
there.
could be me, yeah.
And we have had officers who have been there, and then the next year we're adding their name.
Yeah.
And, you know, you think about that, and I always say that to people in any other profession, where does that happen?
Yeah.
And folks in the community will say, well, when officers see that and experience it, what do? They go to work the next day.
They go to,
And they continue serving. And that's why the people we get to work amongst are so remarkable, I think.
that uniform right back on, and they're right back out there standing that line.
I think about the night that Molly was shot. She was shot about 10 minutes to 10 at night. And, you know, we were woken up. I was not working on duty at the time. I was a street sergeant, but of course we all went in that night to try to find. And of course we had a manhunt because he was on the loose, and ultimately another officer was shot before he took his own life. But I think about that piece of, you know, we saw our friend be shot and very seriously injured that night, and all the officers, there was not a question, everybody went in to try to find the person that did that, the horrible evil that did that to that young lady, and without thought of what could even happen to them after they just watched it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
That's
I remember
exactly
thinking,
right.
my husband is also in law enforcement. I told you I'm surrounded. It's been my whole life. I think I tried to marry my dad, but anyway, that's a whole other issue. But
We got people here that
yeah,
can talk
I'm
to you
sure
about
there's
that.
counselors here for
Hey,
me.
that's what happens,
Special
man.
counselors for me.
That's
but,
right.
But I think about that night. That was the first time that I was truly afraid for his safety, and that's the kind of fear. Like, officers have fear, and we.
Sure.
That's right.
I think that's the thing when you have a line of duty death, is that it sparks that little bit of fear that could happen to my family. And the people that are working the streets today, that are out there working anyway, they are true heroes in our nation, and I'm proud to work among them, to still be connected somewhat to them, and to be there, the whole team, the whole chapters, the whole survivor team, the whole staff, to be there in the event that something terrible happens. I'm glad that we'll be there, but I pray every day that we don't add another member to the COPS organization.
Well, as we've said, we're live here in Nashville, Tennessee. We're at the Sheridan Music City Hotel, where the Wellness Summit is occurring. We do have some people here. Same thing, if you got a question that you'd like asked, write it down real quick, bring it up here, and we'll ask it of these two ladies before we wrap up. While you might be thinking of that question, let me ask you this. For COPS, tell me a little bit about the structure. How large, how much staff do you have? Where's the COPS office located? Those kinds of things. Because I think many people don't realize, you hear all this work that's being done. How many folks are doing that?
Yeah, so our COPS staff organization, we're actually based out of Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, believe it or not. Our founder, Susie Sawyer, 40 years ago, she founded it in Prince George County, Maryland.
Okay.
And when her husband retired, they wanted to fish and golf. And if you want to fish and golf, come visit us at Lake of the Ozarks, because it's a great place to live. So early on in COPS, she got permission to move the organization there. So that's where we are. We have about 30 full-time staff that work out of about a 15,000 square foot office in Missouri. When we respond, we're about 3 hours from an airport, so we drive everywhere to get to the airport to fly. But it's a great place to offer services, because we're free of politics. There's no politics really there, national politics anyway. And our staff they're Midwest folks that come together, and we can bring our programs to the middle of the country so we can serve the whole nation. So that's where we are. We serve about 73,000 survivors now.
Say that again.
Yeah,
73. I didn't realize it was that many.
73,000.
73,000. That includes the coworkers that have registered through COPS, acknowledging their loss as well. So
Wow.
I don't want the coworkers out there to forget that there's
God
services
bless
available for them
them
too.
all.
That's huge. Well, this question fits well with all that. With that many survivors you're providing service and support for. And that's, how do you seek funding for the COPS organization?
So we yeah, it's a challenge. So we're funded, about a third of our funding comes from the Department of Justice. We have a grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance and have had that partnership for many, many years. So It's a cooperative agreement that we'll teach about PSOB. We'll help families file for their benefits, and we do that all the time, all throughout the year. So that's about a third of our funding. The rest comes through partners that we have. We have major law enforcement sponsors like Streamlight Flashlights and Glock, and you name the major partners. That there's a chance that we've had a connection with them, and they've supported us. So
now PSOB stands for?
Here I was acronyming it, wasn't I? It stands for the Public Safety Officers, sorry, that's the suicide one. It's the Public Safety Officer Benefit Program.
Okay, for those of you watching, and you didn't know what that meant.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a benefit that if an officer dies in the line of duty, that the federal government will pay a one-time benefit to the family.
That's amazing.
Which is critically needed.
Oh, very
Because
needed.
like you said, their whole world's turned upside down, and you've lost a financial provider in that family, and a lot of people, they forget about that. I always say we don't break a glass case and pull our officers out in case of an emergency. They're women and men. They're your neighbors. They have families. They have people that are depending upon them, and yet they still go out there to serve the rest of us, knowing what they're putting to risk.
Yeah.
And when the tragedy occurs, it's incumbent upon all of us as a society to make sure that we stand by those families.
And those families know what they have at risk.
That's right.
The officer knows what he or she is risking, but the family also knows what they're risking, that dad may not come home or mom may not come home that night, and they could possibly be the only breadwinner of the family, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that money's very, very important.
It's really true, and while all of us expect that it can happen, the families don't really expect that it is going to happen.
Right.
And
it's always
often,
somebody else.
Often what we'll see is even like an officer is killed, if they're killed towards the end of the month, their health insurance may be cut off on the 30th of that same month. So there's immediate needs that happen. Yeah, it's definitely a reality of those families that there's some immediate needs that they need after a death.
Wait, say that again. So if an officer loses his or her life towards the end of the month.
Well, really any time in the month, but at the end of that
month.
month.
But at the end of that month, it could happen almost seemingly instantly that the family loses their health benefits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody slapped somebody in Congress. That is just not right.
Well, it's why it's so important to have organizations like this that are stepping through that process.
Holy schmoly.
And you can see how quickly it can become overwhelming for these families.
Sure.
They've never had to even contemplate that. And then they find themselves in the middle of that. So,
wow.
Ladies.
I would be remiss one more time. I talked about that funding, and I need to give a shout out to law enforcement organizations across the country that support us. There's days that we'll open up the mail, and there'll be a check at the mail that comes from an FOP group or another law enforcement group too. So I want to just give a shout out to those who know what could happen. They're the ones who really come through and support us. So,
well, thank you for what your organizations are doing in law enforcement and to help families and survivors, and gosh, just can't say thank you enough. And may the Lord bless you with all the money you need. May those checks keep coming. Right. And if you're watching this podcast and you have means and you have money, and this is a way that you can be a part of law enforcement and support and help these organizations like this that do so much for families that are left to try to clean up the aftermath of such a horrible event in their life, no matter how it occurs. So thank you so much for all that your teams are doing.
Well, and I want to say this to you. You mentioned hope. And, the important thing, I think, for both of you to remember, because you can become overwhelmed doing this work, is that the work that the organization is doing, but you through your leadership you're providing, is hope. And, one of the things that we talk about quite often is the difference that hope can make, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you lose all hope, that's when you see people really go swirling the drain and bad things happening. But just to be able to step in and provide a little bit of light in that darkness is huge. It's why we do the candlelight vigil, to symbolize that, all those other things. The key thing to remember is when you look at it from this biblical perspective, Chris knows this, it was like an epiphany light bulb moment for me. was you read through the Bible time and time again, all of this, all the scriptures that talk about hope. Yeah. And when you dig into the meaning behind the word, I always say this, to me, hope is like a 50-50 shot. I hope this happens. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But when you actually dig into the scriptures and the words for that, the Greek translation for hope is the word elpis, E-L-P-I-S. And elpis means expectation. It actually means a guarantee. And so every time you hear the word hope in Scripture, and we talk about hope through faith, what we're really saying and what the Scriptures are saying, what God is saying to us, is you can have a great expectation in Him. A guarantee, if you turn yourself and your heart to Him, He shows up every single time. Yeah. But He also needs us as humans to be His hands and feet to provide that hope and great expectation here on earth. So I can't thank you enough for what you do and making that happen. And you're plowing ground for folks to come behind you. So it can seem so simple sometimes, but I think it's vitally important just to say thank you. Thank you truly.
And without hope, there's no faith. The Bible says in Hebrews chapter 11 that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for.
Expected.
No hope, no faith. Got to start with hope.
That's right. So last thing, if you got a local law enforcement officers, maybe they don't have a chapter of cops in their area, but they say, hey, we need this. How do they go about getting that established through you guys?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is go to our website and just look to see what chapters are existing, because there's a good chance there is one in your state that you may just not have connected with. If you live in a really rural state like South Dakota and North Dakota, and there's truly hasn't been many line-of-duty deaths there, you may not have one yet. And the reason that happens like that is because these chapters are all survivor-based, so they're all volunteers. And so it takes a number of survivors in the area in order to create a chapter. But if somebody's interested in that and they have not connected with their chapter, or if they think they don't have a chapter, if they get a hold of me through our website, you can find me on concernsofpolicesurvivors.org, and we'd be happy to walk you through what is available in your area. If you have a line-of-duty death and there's no chapter, that doesn't mean all hope is lost. There is a regional trustee that will reach out, and we will pair your state with another adjoining state to make sure that they still get that support. But we are absolutely interested in anybody that wants to help connect to a chapter or to start one. They can reach out to us.
Super and cool. Shelley, same thing with survivors of blue suicide. Is that expanding out too in that manner?
Or not to the level of having chapters yet.
Okay.
Do I see that in the future? Probably. But
anywhere in the country, folks can contact you and get immediate, I assume, resources and support.
Contact me. They can call the COPS National Office, and they transfer the call directly to me. And I answer my phone 24/7. So if an agency loses somebody or has lost an officer in the past to suicide, just call me, and I will reach out to the family and start connecting them.
Well, I want to close with one last scripture before we close this thing out, because I think it's so fitting. It's in the book of Romans. I always tell everybody, this stuff is actually in this book. This book is like available for all of us. It's amazing what you can find when you look in here.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
How it speaks to things today. And in the book of Romans in chapter 12, it's actually verse 12, it says this: rejoice in hope, like we were just talking about. Rejoice in it. Rejoice in the expectation we can all have in God through Christ. Be patient in tribulation. Have patience through the trials and tribulations that we face.
The junk we go through.
That's right. Yeah. And then the final thing is this: be constant in prayer.
There you go.
Never stop praying and talking to God about your situation. That's right. And that's what we're trying to do with this podcast. I can't thank you enough for being on here, sharing this information with folks. And I hope that this episode, but also all the other episodes we do, speak to our officers, their family members, survivors.
Absolutely.
And just the general public as well.
Yep. Well, we appreciate being included in this, and thank you for what you do every day to provide hope.
I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
Very honored to have you. And listen, if maybe you're an officer right now and you're watching this in a parking lot somewhere, and you've been having some thoughts and you're wrestling with your own heart and your mind, and you feel like you're desperate and in despair, there is help. And you're not at the end of the line. You're not at the end of your time. You're not at the end of your career. You're not at the end of your life. There is help. We can help you. Jesus can help you. And we can get help to them, can't we, ladies?
Absolutely.
So don't give up.
Please.
Reach out to us. Don't give up, because we can get help to you just as quick as you would say code 1. We can just shout out spiritual code 1, suicide code 1. We'll get help to you. Am I right?
Absolutely. And there's plenty of resources and organizations that are ready there to jump in, and you can contact any of them. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, my friend. This was fun.
It was fun.
Good.
It's a great time. We bless you and appreciate you watching, and hope you continue to do so. Hit that bell, subscribe, send a thumbs up, tell us about your grandkids, pet the dog, rub the cat, whatever. But help us keep doing this, because this is what we do. And we want to keep helping officers all around the world and their families. And we call you blessed. We will see you real soon. Hey, thanks for joining us today. Rick and I trust that you heard something that will help your life. And if you believe that it would help others, please make sure and share. Like and subscribe and hit that bell so that you can be notified when the next podcast is available. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.